So we started out with a little walk today. So you want to know the secret to getting natural results. A secret to everything is about enduring awkward stages. And on a social level, the breakdown with society has to do with the family. And the same thing, going through awkward stages. The awkward stages are the most pivotal for development. And that's why many people, especially in the past, thought of bodybuilding or natural body sculpting, however you want to term it. Really what you're doing is you're building your cells up. You're building yourself up cell by cell from the inside, right? And that outward, some would say reflection, but that outward projection becomes a statement of who you are. And it adds into some clouded ideologies because you get to a point where you're not really sure who you are. Like physically, when your waist, like right now my waist is really soft. Whenever I eat a lot of oatmeal, the waist just goes out of proportion. My body has a hard time digesting it, but it's a great tool to use, low cost, of getting those carbohydrates up and even getting some fiber in. Now, a lot of people would debate that. So what you find is you got a lot of people in this carnivore camp who are stuck in a certain gear where they accept things, items, terms. You could say there's a sense of stoicism here, as they are, and don't really see the value in going out of proportion, right? In one area or the other, one arm, one wing or the other. And this really is manifest in a physical form. That's why steroids, like I'm, on a lot of levels, I'm completely against the use of any PEDs. Because otherwise you would have, through exponentials, you would have the training, really going back to like sort of a Mussolini, Stalin, Hitler type expression, right? If everyone was a bodybuilder, you would be able to see the physicality. What if people were forced to develop? What if people had to, physically train and put their might against another's, right? Well, you would have people who are very arm-centric, over-muscled, as they say, right? Muscle-bound. And oddly, that's a term where the legs are lagging in development. For me, may even appear that way, but I've spent not countless, but since I was a teenager doing this, I've focused primarily on heavy squats, for my lower body at least. So once that other dumbbell gets here, I'll be going through a series of, in fact, I'm very sore from yesterday where I wanted to be sore, my biceps. But this is pretty light to do this exercise, but I need to get a good stretch, and that was part of why I really wanted to get these dumbbells. Right. is to get used to holding them. So these are just the 30s. But I'm going to go through this. So we get a nice little stretch there. And then we'll set them down. So I get a lot of tightness in my lower back. And that exercise allows me to go deeper into a stretch. So that as I go back to it, I'm able to go into a full stretch. Dumbbells, kettlebells allow a quick, expedient way to address specific motor muscle movements. So you're going to go through times where you're very unsophisticated in your movements, where you are muscle bound, especially when you're making up for, really, it's lost time. It takes a certain amount of time to recover. The hamstrings, the lower back, they seem to recover very quickly. That's the tough part of working my biceps yesterday, is you're trying to hit areas that are underdeveloped, and the reason they're underdeveloped is because they're much slower to heal back, right? So you kind of avoid them, in other words. See how I have that depth from the prior set? I'm staggered stance. Yeah, 10's feeling really good there. And I'm not trying to let a lifting session take over my morning walk, because I really want to be able to just focus on more aerobic activity. But my end all goal is what's not seen, and that is to train all day, all through the day, every day. To break up my workouts like I did when I was a master level trainer, an advanced personal trainer. Top of the heap, not necessarily, but then you don't have, so there's a time, a place where you saw that there's a lot of overpaid trainers that were chiropractors and physical therapists. And people felt obviously a reassurance knowing that this person's got more medical training, right? i.e. understanding. Yet, what trumps all that is if you get this uneducated Mr. Olympia competitor, or even Mr. Universe, or right, competitive bodybuilder walking in, and it's like, whether this guy was on steroids or not, he knows his shit, right? So there is merits based on accomplishments, right? Yeah, wow, I could feel my lats. We'll probably get one more set on that, because that felt really good. That gave me a nice lat stretch. Actually, that's a perfect weight today. I'm not in any hurry in any of my training. There is a time limit though. But what you do, this is why heavier weight, higher resistive forces work in your favor. And that is more resistance with longer rests makes up for an extra minute or two, right? Because that added recovery, really with the anaerobic phosphagen, creatine stores, right? Phosphagen system. So we'll be doing this with the 55s next week. That was nice. It allows me to stretch a little bit more unilaterally or ipsilaterally. Right? This uni is the single side. Ipsi is that lattice work, the opposing side. These are all just terms. Terms that allow organization, individuals, but really families of schools of thought to speak to one another about a particular subject. You are a family. You yourself are a family. And what they want to do is have your existential projection of a family altered, destroyed, controlled by the ideation of cruxing an existential idea of a family and then distorting that. Everything is a form of neurolinguistic programming and synesthesia. And any capricious God would have problems with that, would know that. Any thought-involved entity, all-pervading entity, would have major issue with anyone going into this sort of strict regulation. So when people are exclaiming the Bible is true, I really want them to take into account the fact that the Old Testament and the New Testament is get on God's good side. The Old Testament is, this is what God's really all about. But we can lament. We can debate, in a sense. Every item, I'm right way more than I want to admit to myself. Okay? So when I say this, it really needs to be taken seriously. Is that we have not only the idea of, but the proof of, that we will not put together through all the human sacrifice, going back to the Younger Dryas, and any proofs that we have prior to, which have been heavily occulted, all the way up to modern era, right? Where you have these entities and possibly one main intelligence that is invading space constantly. And what this proves is that whatever God there is a primal God. Is a primal God. That's scary. A primal thinker. I think I got enough. I don't want to overdo it. I got 3 sets of 10. And if I had the 55s, I'd do some farmer's carries, but I think I might do just like a farmer's walk. Just with these 30s that I have so far. So Let's do a few passes with this. Very light, good for the grip. All right, kind of mess with the grip a little bit. We're not shooting for any records. Great for the calves. Kind of makes me want to do another set of good mornings or hamstring stretches, however you want to, toe touches. Yeah, let's do one more. Let's see. I remember that exercise doing them with quite a bit more weight. 55s will work really well with those. And then I'll be able to add on probably another 10 pounds where I'm using totes. Yeah. 4 sets that I otherwise wouldn't have had. And so at that angle, with my squats, 28 pounds wound up feeling like 135 to 185, right? It was pretty crazy how leaning back really isolates the quads. And I'm trying to train myself to do full, deep squats. Nothing feels better than weeks going by, feeling 400 plus pounds clanking, you know? And turning them into reps. Some days, the power output, you know, you get kind of this flu feeling. And what that is that really has to do with your anabolic steroidogenesis, okay? Your body is warding off or fighting. There's an immune system response where you get this cortisol effect. And androstenedione and steroidogenesis is then skipped in lieu of focusing on your immune system. So then you have a completely different subset of synergistic nutrients that are being utilized that are more supportive of your immune system. It could be a variety of different things, but a lot of times your body is so sore for so long, right? And particularly when your neurohormones are affected, your body starts to think that it's sick. And maybe it is overtraining on one side where you think you're just training. This happens pretty often where people think that they're, they're looking at their fitness magazine and they're going on, this is what everyone does. And they don't realize that, especially back in the 80s where they didn't admit anything about, I'm surprised that these guys even show their faces like Lee Haney and so forth. Like they just go along with whatever the popular narrative is and they call themselves fundamentalist Christians. but they're always riding the rails, right, of ped use. Whereas other men grapple with themselves and say, so who would you want to be your hero? If you're going to idolize somebody, wouldn't you want to know that what their body represents is also what their philosophy, matches perfectly? And that is the way the universe, through principles, is and should be truly set up. So when you get into this area where you see people that are rewarded using, you can pronounce this word so many different ways, machinations against their fellow man. Depends on how highbrow you want to seem at the time. Machinations against their fellow man. But they plan on disrupting, disturbing, creating disorder. And again, it comes down to familiar lines. It comes down to a family and how strong your family is. What we're seeing, right, is weak family. And I feel very strongly about Charlie Kirk, and have for several months, where I learned to detest everything about him. I saw through him. And then it comes down to, well, when somebody stands for a codified strip of information and they stay concrete like a child, like an infant, to that strip of information, right? Unyielding, unbending. In fact, being financed prior to the age of 18 and over the last 13 years, sticking to that, right? Sticking to that plan, sticking to that ideology when the ideology itself is completely wrong. It's right-wing, it's staunch. He was making a fool out of himself globally. But the statement, the ultimate statement that Charlie Kirk really made, and it really matters amongst intellectuals, is the fact that he was undeveloped at this time in 2025. Somebody that's so starkly undeveloped could get away with promoting an $80 million business. People don't like to hear it. They want to sing kumbaya and pretend that there's unity outside the self when there's not even unity within the self. You have to, what I call the power of one, you have to collectively come back to the family of one, who you are. Do you even get along with the microbial organisms in your body? Or are you always assaulting them, right? Are you making yourself stronger by not identifying yourself as a self, right? But saying this too is a collective, right? So universally, you could say justice was done. Ooh, that's callous, right? But that's not what happened, is it? Because factions, it turns out that this Phillips, who is it, Tyler Phillips, was in fact a right-wing, if you could say he was anything, and it came from a right-wing family, right? Now I would even venture to say that the guy is probably 20 IQ points above Charlie Kirk. Why he did it, I have no idea. It could come down to something that's so antithetical and unseen that we study here on this channel that gets into Operation GCD, Unfiltered Rise, all this, we're talking about programmed killers. I mean, so much so that when Charlie Kirk was talking about gang violence, those are the last two words he said, gang violence, in reference to a debate. And people were being entertained because they wanted to come out and they wanted to feel the heat of a revolution. And I think what was noticed by the powers that be, those that are not partisan, but just use partisanship as a tennis match, is that, wow, this is blowing up too quickly and there's too many left-wing people showing up that are enjoying this. This is going to turn into something else, right? We need to stop this right where it's at, right in its tracks. Because what would have come out And what may still come out, though heavily altered now and suppressed, is a left-wing version of Charlie Kirk, where you have somebody who's boldly blazoned to come out and talk about just the opposite, the antithetical view of, this is me. This is my statement to the universe. Why do you fucking care if I call myself a tranny or that's your existential terminology. Me, I'm just trying to figure out what the fuck's going on here, right? And what you find is that this entire group of high-level thinkers, high-level achievers, Ted Kaczynski, fucking IQ off the charts, right? All these guys, you could debate it and say Timothy McVeigh wasn't in that category, but I would beg to differ. I'd say most of these people who agreed to operationally setting a fire unto the world, literally, as a rebel faction, that you could very well also look at Jesus through Ralph Ellis' scope, if you will, for a moment, and see through the lens of that and say, Jesus was a part of a rebel faction. And when Ralph Ellis looks at all this, which most people, I mean, he's been hushed more than anyone. I love how Michael Tessarien's backing him up, just like how Michael Tessarien backed up Jordan Maxwell and never relented and said your contributions outweigh any stigma, right, that could be placed on you that keep people from going in and thinking about. See, it's not really about the ultimate truth. That's always going to be debated. And then the more harsh observance of this, that is the left wing. So the reason that the right wing, so the reason the left wing is doing violence is because the right wing has throughout history had a propensity for violence, right? So they're trying to enact first strike. Because the truth is that the people on the left I guarantee outscore the right-wing conservatives, like the true right-wing conservatives versus the left wing. I guarantee that the left wing's 15 to 25 IQ points higher on average, a minimum of 10 or 12. Which begs, what is rationalism? If that's what rationalism turns out to do, is to utterly confuse people, to leave them with this massive flesh that they feel, they feel the full scope of morbidity constantly, to the point where they're trying to figure it out like a jigsaw puzzle. One person's hacking off their tackle, right? And what's not being seen is this is akin to a solar cult. This is akin to trying to find God. We are all trying to find God. It's just the people who say, I've found God and this is good enough. That's scary, right? Because when you finally see what their ideology is, like Charlie Kirk, it blows your mind away. So short-sighted, such a liar, so skewed in his efforts, right? That just about every fact that comes out of his mouth can be disputed. And then finally, when he does land on something that has some level of accuracy, he gets all excited. He used to get all excited, right? Those aren't all right-wing supporters that show up for his rallies. So the left is not stupid. The left has realized, just like the Brit a couple weeks ago showed up while he's debating these really highbrow college students. This girl shows up and she's a feminist, right? But she's a very intellectual, very well-educated, I wouldn't even say neo-feminist because it's gone beyond, just like Virginia Woolf or, and I'm not putting that down, but what I'm saying is you have a platform to then argue beyond the mere recourse of this is why I'm a witch. I put that together, right? It's to say this is why I own myself, right? And so she's wearing this shirt that is emblazoned with the American flag, and it throws Charlie Kirk's small syllogistic mind off, right, to where he wasn't prepared, and then all of a sudden she's coming in. But that was a pretty good tactic. But he doesn't stand for males. In fact, the higher mind of the male is being suppressed. And Charlie Kirk brought up some points about that. I mean, you could have gotten that from Danny Jones 2 years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago, where, you know, the discussion of ever lower sperm count. Really what's happening on a stage is the transient, transcendental, transhumanistic effort, right, to take technology and either replace women entirely with technology, an artificial womb that's superior, right? Imagine knowing that the biorhythms could be replicated and duplicated on such a multifarious scale that the zygote, let's use this term, the homunculus could be formed and shaped into something so superior that you could have people that are akin to Mozart on every scalable level, right, emerge. And that this might be able to be done in a much faster and more expedient way with time gradients and spin cycles and a lot of the other things that are being studied right now today. But then you have this female faction that would like to replace men with technology, where it's like, look, the ovum, I mean, all you know, all the parts, right? All the female parts, right? The placenta, right? Everything is there, is female. And the only contribution is, it's like this Virginia Woolf, is this penetrating, really rapist aggression of insemination, the spark of life, if you will. Is that even required, right? As far as the male contribution. So you have these really good arguments on both sides. And I believe that this has already been ventured into, hacked, if you will, and that there are factions on both sides. And here's another thing, it's like, they like to suppress Stalin's work, primates, human primate, chimera, right? And there's so much documentation that it was successful, right? Went back 75, 80 years. So, actually further than that, going back 100 years almost. So, if you were to take whatever Bigfoot is and to say, well, they're going to need to live in an undisturbed naturalistic state to develop. And so where would primates and early humans go? What would they do? What would their nature be? What would their ontology be? And it's like everything that's talked about, like out in these areas, then you'd have this probably caving system, this underground dweller, this travel by night, right? Techne, ability, and and they may even, their lifespan may be quite lower, right? They might live 25, 30 years. So you might have 5 to 6 generations of these beings that have spread and increased in population. And there may be something going on here where it's like, let's give another subset of human endeavor an opportunity to rise up, right? Let's take the best and the most wild aspects, but the most intellectual, right? And let's allow this to nurture itself, right? And what if we took all these factions from your top feminist point of view, from your druidic good old boy, super good old boy, right, point of view, the Adonai, right, point of view, the Hathor point of view, and let's designate these into factions where each faction has its so-called messiah or highest figure or highest state of development. And let's allow them to go through their own nature, right? To the point where it's been very off-putting to give people religions that force them into a lack of development and make them think that they chose it because there's no other choice, right? There's no other choice before you. It's a 2-bit, 2-dimensional construct that we live in. And I believe that there's an alliance occurring that is doing something not precisely that, but something very akin and close to that. Akin to and close to that. Because there has to be this uracil scrambling occurring, right? There has to be a randomized pick where the gods are thrown into the mix, right? Or fate or chance, right? And that quite literally the zodiacal influence would be expounded upon, you know? You would have features like Venus and the effects on the female, feminine form, right? So when you realize that it's no holds barred, one subset of people can get away with more, whereas the other is constantly chastised and put down. Well, this kind of changes places, doesn't it? Right? To where the internal thoughts and the magic, right? The will had to, and this is man's time. This is man's time. This is what Nietzsche talked about. It's not going to be the most buffed idea of Superman. That's not what the Ubermensch is all about. That's not what the Overman is about. The Overman is the man who figures out, wow, I'm not allowed to use my brute strength or my voice, right? That's louder, more commanding, right? I'm not allowed to use my male fury. You see it over and over again. But these men are torn down. I'm being forced by the forces to develop my magical will, my strength, my ability to interface my imagination with reality and command it from, right? So you see all these practitioners like Gerald Gardner, right? That he would ironically lead this Wiccan coterie or coven, right? Or Aleister Crowley. And they were telling you, and Jung understood this. Jung understood this. He understood that this darker aspect and the dark night of the soul, this Darth, this Luke Skywalker confronting Darth Vader and seeing that it was himself, they did no justice in that movie, but it really marked a time, and that's what people don't understand also. It's like, wow, if this movie was made now with the intellect or the philosophical prowess that we are getting more comfortable with now, the statement would have been different. But if you would take that movie, that rendering back 60 years, right, people would feel very disquieted and uncomfortable. 50 years, right? Closer to 50 years. 45, 50. But I'm talking about the idea, right, coming up from the tail end of the 1960s and what was being promoted, right? So what you'd have is you would have a very dark aspect of this Luke Skywalker that was using much more force, right? He would be using his mind predominantly. And the thing is that they they show that the higher the power is, the more they use the force. Darth Vader, Anakin, right? Gripping people's necks constantly, right? Or Palpatine, right? The Emperor being able to electrify people and throw them across a fucking room, right? And Luke Skywalker was better because he used less force. You follow? Like, it was kind of surprising when he would make, he could barely make the fucking ship levitate, right? He could barely muster unless he really was feeling emotional and cathartic, right? So it's a man who's tapped into his emotions. It's a man who understands Plutchek's will, and then also understands that a lot of these dials inside are correlated back to a feminine force. In fact, it's been indoctrinated into you. And that is the endocrine system and the glands, right? And you feel it. You feel that you've felt the sway that just your average female has had in her aberrant emotions, even and most especially when she's wrong. They do it on the highways every day. You watch these women go into these bitch fests. It's amazing that more car accidents aren't women, right? I was amazed at that statistic, but the truth is because then the male is incited and ends up doing the crazy shit while the female laughs like a witch and she enjoys igniting and creating chaos, right? And that is what the woman does. I'm talking about the interpretation of the female in society. I'm not discussing the higher ontological inference of someone who is actually pronouncing themselves as being and becoming, where they may even use that, right? I'm talking about somebody who understands the force, right? And there's this immature, concrete notion to go back to society, to go back to the comfort and the maturation of, no, you're here now. And maturity means dealing with all of the ramifications of what the battlefield represents here and now. And the crazy thing is that it might be refreshing, right? It might be refreshing that there were bloodshed and physical loss that you could actually account for, as opposed to people just becoming absent and losing themselves into darkness and no longer being present, no longer being there, no longer being your father, your sister, your mother, your brother, right? That somebody's will could be taken. That's what's going on today. And so I've heard it said many times, and I was thinking this for a long time. Like, when are people going to start going, fuck, I gotta work all day. I got fucking car payments. I gotta deal with a cheating spouse. I gotta deal with this. Who the fuck has time to develop themselves internally? And then the answer would be, well, you put yourself in that position. But the true answer is you were put in that position, right? And that now you're dealing with something that would even further the point that only the most pronounced, rare item would emerge from all of that pressure. You know, the diamond, so to speak, the diamond coming out. But now we can produce diamonds in 6 weeks, 5 or 6 weeks, perfect diamonds. Actual diamonds. Is it the same? Is it the same? So what's being stated today is like, it doesn't matter how many steroids, growth hormone, insulin, PEDs, any sort of cheating that's done, as long as when you get up on that stage, you look like this, that's all that matters. So then you have, invariably, you have this test of wills where it's like, you have bodybuilders from America and they're using illegal controlled substances. How long are we going to let that slip by? I'm not saying stop them. What I'm saying is acknowledging, like, you got Phil Heath standing there, Tiger Woods, right? You got these people who have taken stuff, right? And let's leave Tiger Woods out of it, but because that's something that is under debate. I don't debate it. I mean, you know, you got a guy who's benching 300 plus pounds, who's a golfer, right? But let's say Phil Heath, a known PED user, standing there, I believe at President Trump, I hate to say that, President Trump's inauguration, right? Wasn't he standing right there? And it's like, you're going to acknowledge this person out in public, and you wouldn't even know his name if it weren't for PEDs. Yet, you also stand for the personage who's going to throw that guy in prison, because really what he's doing is he's selling more PEDs, right? He's the poster child for it. Mr. Olympia, boom, right? And now, at least there's a little more honesty there, where we have Eastern Indians winning, where you can go into fucking drugstores and buy any steroid you want. You know? What's right? What's wrong? What mechanism or arm of control is correct? And the truth is, the ultimate statement at the end of the day is discernment. With discernment, with intelligence, with a higher ontological understanding of being and becoming, everyone would be, so there has to be a minimum standard. So the manipulation here is, let's keep people stupid. Instead of everyone having 135, being considered a Rhodes genius, 135 to 175 IQ standard, right? Standard. 115 on the low end, where most lawyers are like 105 and below. Look it up. Now you got ChatGPT. And by the way, Charlie Kirk used to reference ChatGPT. And then people would go, ChatGPT. It's like ChatGPT isn't being refuted, it's actually being upheld, because it has a higher level of efficacy, because it's just pulling on open source. In other words, open source, the collective, the consensus has become the truth. That if it can't be found to be something you can refute with information on the internet, then there's no other way to refute it. In other words, that consensus has become your God. It's the eye of the beholder, the collective, right? So what was happening all along? What is the zodiac? Well, it's taking all 12, and you could say you have these cusps that are also involved, right? So you have these colors and these hues. But from the zodiacal sense, you have all of this representation taking place as the internet. The internet is human ontology. You understand? And when you put all that together as source information, you've got a God. And then you have facts and factoids that are spit out as truth. Remember what Nietzsche said, there are no facts, only interpretations, right? So now you have information that can be vetted more aggressively with an agenda behind it. So I don't back vetting. I don't think vetting means a goddamn thing. Because if vetting meant anything, then you've learned nothing of what I've said here now. But I'm bringing up relevant points of discourse with yourself. Don't you understand that you are, within you is a suppressed voice that understands more than your average higher intellectual person? That you're able to express something that is way beyond mere representation of just arguments. I should probably have some protein at this point. And so this is really good. And no, nobody's even viewed or come into view on this live stream. Why do I do them? Because it's going to be seen and acknowledged in the future. Because that person that's most likely alive right now, that's going to watch this and it's going to have value to them, right, in the future, wouldn't receive this information the same way right now. Weird, right? So it's like this unlocking. It's like the chambers are being unlocked. I think we're going to make a little, I don't think I'm just going to slam that down. I think we're going to make a little cream of wheat. Back off the oats today a little. So what's being debated, and we've all unfortunately come to this, is where we're surprised that what people really think and what they express and what they actually argue about or debate in public is close to one another. Where in another time, when and if truth were held to the highest esteem, you would have that occur always, that somebody would talk about and not have to talk around what their true will, philosophy, and beliefs are. They should match. They should match perfectly every time. There shouldn't be any disparate tension between what you say, who you are, and what you believe. So hopefully this dumbbell gets here tomorrow. But yeah, we got 4 nice light sets of toe touches. Really stiff leg deadlifts is what it was. 4 sets of 10. And if I can, I'll be training a session with abs today. Mostly focusing on just doing abs. I haven't done it like a standalone ab-centric exercise day in a long, long time. Yeah, this tastes just like Fruit Loops. Amazing, actually, the way they got that flavor down. Give it a quick stir. Not too quick. And then put it in for another minute. So yeah, I broke open those those dumbbells yesterday, so to speak. I really wanted to see where I was at, and my strength is much more pronounced than I thought. Those 30s feel like little, the 30s feel like 20s, 15s or 20s to me, of where I thought I was. And the 55s, once I have both of them, I'll be able to do sets of 10, no problem. It's really hard to do the single side curl when you don't have something ballasting you, you know? So it looked like it was a lot harder than it was. But my biceps are feeling it today. And I was even able to get a set of 5 on each side of single-sided side laterals after doing all that. So we're gonna let that sit. Been having a lot of neck tension, but I've been watching I've been looking down and watching Mr. Robot. And Mr. Robot is an indicator, it's indicative of what's going on today. Mr. Robot, I think, was made around 2014, 2015, I think it was. That actor Malak. And it's great because I want to include my traps in my side laterals. I'm not trying to evade the traps. To me, the entire area through the frontal plane and drifting into diagonal movements is what is my goal. If you can't do heavy shrugs, if you don't have, 120-pound dumbbells available to you to really hit the top of your traps and the medial portion of your traps, right? The only thing that's going to make those mofos grow is really intense variance in side laterals, right? So I'm able to either do 55s, 30s, 38 pounds, adding a gallon water in, where I'm going to fill my gallon containers with undrinkable tap water after I drink this and have them ready to go all the time. And then you've also got 46 pounds because I can add on 2 of those, add a tote on. It worked well. I was surprised. So you got 30s, 38s, say 40s, 46, 45s, 50s, right? And then I can also change up the weights by just, say, putting a 5-pound bag of rice in with the water, right? So all I did is I layered in about 5 or 6 with duct tape, right? Supported 5 or 6 plastic Walmart shopping bags that are able to hold a good 20 pounds, right? So I can turn those 30s into 50s. And then even more so, I can do the same thing with the 55s. I can turn that into 75, 80 pounds of weight. So, I mean, what more do I need, right? What more do I need? I mean, so by having those 2 sets of dumbbells, I have 6 to 8 sets. I got a full spectrum. Even more so, I can use the bags for light weights, up to 20. I could throw two 20-pound bags of rice in those shopping bags and use them for side laterals or curls or whatever if I'm trying to go really light. Or bent over rows, things like that. Or bent over rear delt raises, I mean. And they work. And you can operationally use that where you just slip in and you're using the top of your hand. I've done that for many, many years with cable movements and band work. I love bands. So I'll be sticking with my basic band suspension training and body weight movements. Yesterday I was just kind of feeling out where my strength was as far as crude weight with dumbbells, and really surprised where I am, right? So even though it might seem like I'll outgrow those dumbbells really quickly, or maybe I already have, the whole plan is to use increased tote weight to offset the actual amount of the moment arm has to, through the use of gravity, right, overcome. So I'll be able to do 65, 75, maybe even 85-pound dumbbell shoulder presses, things like that. In addition to resistive training bands, super bands. And those super bands are, I'm surprised. The super bands are great. That green band, man, that's a pull-up assist band. That's a very impressive band. It really is giving me 150 pounds at the top, the maximal stretch. And it's a 7-8-year-old band, and if it's lost anything, it's lost very little. It's going to be hard to replace that band. These bands that I got here are complete crap that I paid $27 for. They're literally made out of like a gummy, it's almost like it's biodegradable, right? Well, we're gonna skip the honey today because I've been getting, I'm not gonna say fat, but my waist is wider. I'm storing more, but it really has more to do with water balance and food that's just like stuck in your stomach. And that's why I'm focusing more in on faster carbs here. Also, my protein source is a higher fat, higher carbohydrate protein source. So when you're wanting to get more defined, harder, more dense, which is obviously the goal, you want to be able to just take in strict protein. I've got plenty of chicken and rice and plenty of tuna and plenty of protein powder, so I'm going to be able to do that. This is the first day where I'm really pulling back on the sweets, where I'm just like abstaining from the sugar-covered oats that I've been eating liberally. I almost went through a whole box of 20 in less than a week. And about a week, I guess. So as you add on more lean muscle mass, so I was playing around with the dumbbells also yesterday. That wasn't like a serious workout. It was like, what could I do? You know, what could I put, what kind of dumbbells or weight could I put in this crappy little backpack of mine that won't slide off my back? I wasn't able to balance it properly to do rows, but I see that I'll probably have to devise something because I'm going to need to do weighted rows. So I'll probably just put it on like traditionally and just use it as I would any drag. And I've been doing a lot of small meals. I've been making like full-on hamburgers with bread and high fatty beef, Angus beef patty, and sweet potato fries. The past few days, and I'm going to be skipping that. So you'll find that when you're really putting on muscle mass, you're going to have to put on a little fat. It's just the way it is. You're not going to put on muscle mass without putting on some fat. And then what you do is you do what I'm doing here. You walk, you keep moving. It's all about exercise. Don't get too cerebral. Don't get too stuck in your ways. I'm still a little sore in the legs, but I might even be able to do a leg workout today. All that eating has really assisted my recovery. So yeah, the dumbbells aren't going to be the main priority in my workouts. They're just another added feature. I'm still doing my base program for biceps, the 2 exercises that cannot be beat. I mean, I'd have to have like 90 plus pound dumbbells when I have that backpack on and I'm doing that hanging body weight curl. I'm doing 150 pound to 170 pound curl. But it's not continuous. But on the low end, I mean, 110 pounds, 130 pounds, going right to the bicep, going right into the support. That is a great exercise. And then the supinated TRX curl from that row position, then you do a curl. Great exercise, another 150 pound. And able to really isolate the peak at the top. So the dumbbells are going to allow me, like yesterday, doing some hammers. I was doing some hammers. After I did a live, I went back and did a couple more sets that really topped off the shoulders, the delts, the mid delts, and the biceps. The triceps grow. Never had an issue growing the triceps. So what I'll be doing with the triceps is that gauge between a 55 pound dumbbell, one's perfect, and being able to tote one of those 30s, maybe even 2 30s, right? I mean, I've got over 100 pounds to be able to do an overhead tricep extension. And that works in theory. When you got 2 bags and a hex dumbbell, So we'll see how that goes. But between the push downs that I was doing, which is like 150 pounds of pressure right on the triceps, right? And then the skull crushers that gets more the long head, right, of the tricep. And then that nice stretch that really stretches out the long head with an overhead tricep extension. That gives me the triple header. And I'm gonna be doing flies from the ground. In fact, the only area I could probably do it is right here where I move this out, so where I have enough room to come out and do flies. So we got 55 to 85 pounds, right, with a tote. Where I'll be leaning back on my mat, right? That'll give me about at least 5 or 6 inches is all I need. I just need to be able to clear that with about 5 or 6 inches and then back up. So I got the TRX chest press push-up weighted, which is totally feasible. So I put in 68 pounds yesterday. Now I'll be using 100 pounds if possible. We'll see how far I can push it without breaking that backpack or what I can even pick up, because it's really floppy, right? It's heavy, it's awkward, displaced. But I would say, okay, I did 68 pounds. I could see 85 pounds really throwing me into growth and being akin to benching. Now, mind you, once you add weight in there, my core over the past 3 months has just been dying. That's why my ab development has lagged behind, because my core is always sore and overburdened from all of the TRX pressing chest movements. Man, like that just destroys your core, the rollouts. And I keep eagerly waiting for the point where my core isn't sore, right, anymore. And it's just hitting that. It's just hitting that. I'm 8 weeks in to training with a higher resistive force, where I've gone through a first full stage of hypertrophic preparatory training. So in other words, I'm just getting started. 17-inch arms, 48-inch chest, right? Just getting started. 195, 196 pounds. Just getting started. I've just entered this week, actually Monday will be the first week where I'm actually going in, and the next 6 to 8 weeks is going to be 100% hypertrophy. It takes that long. You're not going to see any real notable changes in hypertrophy until you've been training for a good 8 to 10 weeks. That's why most people just drop out. Like, you won't understand how hypertrophy works until you're entering this stage, right? So I'm very grateful for all the exercises I have. And the only thing that I would critique and say, oh, I don't have appropriate amounts to do this, somehow it's working out. Like, granted, my thighs are the weakest area, and what happened was my thighs aren't uncontrollably thin, nor are they have they never seen the light of day or underdeveloped. I have developed my quads very meticulously and done heavy squats many different times for long periods of time, right? With high reps too. So with that said, if I'm seeing results by just putting a 28-pound backpack on and going into TRX squats, and I'm getting to that 10th rep, or doing Bulgarian squats, lunges, split squats, right? And feeling it for 4 or 5 days, I'm happy because I know I'm affecting all of the muscle fascicles in my quadriceps. I wasn't feeling it in my vastus lateralis on my left side as much, but it's still sore. You know, this side is a good ½ inch smaller than this one. This arm is a ½ inch smaller than this one. Right? So that's why the dumbbells were so detrimental, because they allow you to be able to kind of maneuver at a certain angle to where if you've got asymmetrical issues, i.e., you know, broken bones that haven't healed back right, you can kind of position at a slightly different angle, right, to really accentuate one side to where you start to match it together. You know, you're piecing it together like puzzle pieces. So the core is strong, but the lower back is the one area that needs to be worked the most and that's gotten the least amount of training. But it is an area that grows very quickly and responds regardless of when you start. Now, my favorite back exercise is the 35-degree or hyperextension, right? I love those, doing weighted back extensions. And I may, at some point, be able to get one because they're invaluable. But I have the hip swings that I'm able to do, and that's a great exercise, at least for the articulation of the movement pattern, right? And to really create this like firing pattern. But then the number one thing that's next to the hyperextension is the exercise that I was doing this morning. We were just coming in, you know, and going through the bent over stiff leg deadlift, staggered stiff leg deadlift, right? So I'll be able to do that with those 55 pounders, and then again, using totes to go up and use 85 pounds. And so that's exciting. And I'll also be able to do some farmer's carries, right? And that really helps with the calves. And then I'll be doing more standing calf raises as well, with weighted standing calf raises. So I'll be able to take it pretty damn far, to the point where when I actually go in and hit the gym, I think I'm going to be really surprised. I think I'm putting together a superior program, because when I do work out at 24-hour fitness, I'm over near the TRX most of the time anyway. I'm going, wow. I'm over on the machines because the TRX is too hard for me and I'm hiding from, right? You think about any exercise and you're going to be able to get a more intense skull crushers, curls, rows, just with your body weight, without any added weight. But once you add weight in with it, all you really need is like a 25-pound weight in a backpack. I haven't been doing dips as much because I get lower pec centric anyway. And that's why the number one exercise for years that I would focus on was incline presses. So I'm trying to figure out a way, and I already have, by elevating the feet up on that loudspeaker, right? And going into my press, right? And then setting the TRX handles as low as possible. I'm in a stabilizing suspended upper chest movement that's really going to fire off those upper chest muscle fibers. So it's all there. There really are, there's no exercise that's missing. I think the one thing that's going to be kind of funny is just when I'm just hankering to do a shrug with some weight is kind of figuring out how to tinker with bands and that 170 pounds of resistive force that I've got, plus some bags, right? So I could get away with, I could probably get away with 200 pounds of actual weight, plus some band resistance, and really be able to hit the traps. So my ankles are so small, and my calves are not large, but the proportion of the calf to ankle is double, right? It's double. So I'm right around that 2 times already. So when I just start working on my calves, I'm already starting at a point where the diamond shape is pronounced from the first workout that I do. So when I get up to like 16 and a half calves, right, they look like they're considerably larger. They look like they're like 18 because my ankles are so small. My ankles are 7.5 inches. And the best thing to do for your calves, best thing to do with anything is agonist, antagonist, is to focus on dorsiflexion, right? And to really focus on the anterior tibialis. And I had a machine for a short time to work my anterior tibialis. I really wanted to use that damn thing, and I can't. So I would be doing heavy, there's always a trade-off. I would be doing heavy pull-ups, weighted pull-ups today. But because I pushed my biceps so hard yesterday and didn't even allow full recovery. So everything's always a little sore, right? But because I pushed it so far, but there are areas that have been underworked in my biceps and my arms that where I'm sore, you know, more around the brachii and the outer portion of my bicep. Yeah, so I'm most excited about, I didn't feel like I was really able to tackle my shoulders, even though I love those. But I was also reminded that the lateral raises with the red bands are actually 45 to 50 pounds. Maybe even 55s at the top. So it actually encouraged me to the fact that those red bands were working. That depends on where my feet are, obviously. Like I can take a wider stance and bring them up to 45, 55 pounds. But if I go narrower, it'll bring it down to about 35 to 40 pounds. Even 30, like 30 to 40 pounds. So I have dumbbells now where I'm able to get that, right? So my shoulders are really gonna grow. That's been an area that I'm always like wary of, because it's like I have this major injury in my shoulder that's never going to heal back. But I'm able to work with it. And the stronger it gets and the more areas of articulation I'm strengthening the area in, the less pain I experience. The more I stretch it. So we had a scoop of Fruit Loops protein, tastes just like Fruit Loops. It's a 6-star. We had a scoop of I think the last one that I did yesterday was Frosted Flakes. Tastes just like Frosted Flakes. I haven't tried the chocolate one yet, but these are on sale, I think, still for $14 and some odd change for 1.8 pounds. It comes with this huge scooper, and each serving is supposed to be 30 grams of protein. So I switched out the scooper, and I'm probably going to get more like 22 to 24 scoops per container. So these things are going to last me like all month for sure. So I'm backing off the sugar today. I was thinking about doing 3 carnivore days, but I want to recover and I want to stay growing. I'm probably going to do carnivore again when I get to the place where I feel so solid in my movements, right? And that I probably won't do carnivore for another 2 months because I'm going into another 8 to 10 week mesocycle. So I'm trying to focus my conditioning on all-day training again, right? Going back to the walking, splitting up like I just did 4 sets earlier on this live stream of with 30-pound weights of stiff leg deadlifts, staggered walking. And I will typically involve that in a routine when I'm getting more conditioned, where I'm doing actual lunges, right, with that weight. Obviously, I'll have to make sure I open this area up a little bit, but that shouldn't be a problem. And I'll be doing walking lunges. I'll be actually doing walking lateral movements, where I'm walking and doing lateral movements. Walking presses, right? I really like to involve walking, the motion of walking, for more natural movement patterns. I find that I think actually that's more beneficent to your overall health than Pilates is, where you're essentially putting yourself in traction. I got Pilates certified. I had a job that I was being trained for, groomed for. At that time, I was kind of a pretty looking guy in his, early 40s, around 40 years old, and had a lot of clients already lined up that wanted to train with me in Pilates. But I just couldn't go there. It would have been easy money. But after just training females mainly for years prior to, and seeing the way that was, and there's no way I was gonna deal with it anymore. No way. No more of that. There's something nice about getting old and scruffy looking, to where you can just focus in on your own thing and not be bothered by that whole thing. I'm absolutely not doing this for any existential completion of my internal self. I've already established that, right? It's to get back what I lost. It's to get back what I had to give up. It's to get back the time that I could no longer put into myself, that I sacrificed just in the hope that other people, right? And you could say, oh, that's some really whimsical, pangloss, capricious measure. And it's like, no, there are people who said that they were a certain way, right? And then come down to it, that one last person that I was putting under the artifice of, here's the structural component of who you say you are. Here's what the time and the attention you put into it. What are you? And then the grand statement was, you're just a lie and a fallacy like everyone else. We all are. It's not to stand on any high horse, right? That's why I hate the proselytizing aspect where people are trying to bill and sell a false ideology. And at the end of the day, it's all money. No more heroes. If I were to come out with a shirt that says that in 1,000 different ways, that's the only message that I have. Stop trying to be other people's hero. Stop looking for a hero. You've been indoctrinated. The universe, the cosmos is more fluid than that. The concepts and the ideas change. Another message is highlighted today that was partially muted yesterday. There's a flux in a play. And staunch ideation leads to a complete and total lack of growth and fluidity. So I started this live stream talking about family and how a family, you're only as strong as your family, but at critical points. And I started to show that that is what occurs with your mitochondria, with your biome, your gut health, what's going on with microbial life, microorganisms within you, bolstering cells. I mean, you're talking about a family getting along together, but being able to withstand awkward points in time. So when we look at awkward points in time with people as an interface, right? Dialed out, panned out, you see there's a person there. But that person is an amalgamation and then eventually a directive of the very awkward, hard times they went through at critical stages and ages, 4 to 5 years old. That's a critical age, a critical stage. I'd say prior to that, 3.5, and then they start kind of opening up. The echo chamber opens up a little bit, right? And obviously prepubescent, 8.5, 9.5 years old to 11, and then becomes more solidified around 13. And when you start to look at these family structures, right, you can see exactly what happened when there's this critical breakdown. You can even see how there's an entity that is aware of your child, or you when you were a child, still your child, right, that wants to interfere with that, that's jealous of that. And that's why I say that it is a primal God. And when you look at the Bible, when you look at any so-called holy text, you then have to take what you go through on your average day and go, what if this God went through this shit, right? Oh, that's God. And it's like, no, God's everything, right? Is God strong enough to go in and be the most feeble, delicate person, right? Or to be something, an item that can just get blown in the wind? Does that type of strength exist in God? Right? So you have to start looking at the actual expression and the representation of what all these gods amalgamate into a statement. And the statement is that I am a primal God. I'm a jealous God, right? I am a God who views you not from the hero worship standpoint, but to do the unorthodox. I'm a God that demands your magic, but demands that you do your magic under my name, Isn't that scary? Yeah. So you become the representation, really, what's happening every single day, you know it and I know it, is that every single day you pretend, you posture yourself not to challenge God, but the second that you have the means, that's the first thing you're trying to do, is transhumanistically evolve beyond that. Because you know that God, the pervading power, is a primal entity. That's the scariest thing that you will come into realization with. And then fundamentalist Christians who are undeveloped, we don't need to name them off, but I think there's going to be a lot more of those people succumbing to the violence that they promote. You can't just cut people off and say, no, you can't develop yourself. Right? That's essentially what the far right is doing to the far left. Is they're saying you can't ontologically question things, hack off your own tackle, flip off God, be the weakest and the strongest at the same time. You can't use your mind to be more and to challenge the ontology itself. You can't do that. You have to stay in this rigid little structure. And even more so, at the end of the day, you see that they were doing it for money all along. Charlie Kirk taking in $80 million, Turning Point. And he was heavily subsidized. As a teenager, he was groomed to do it. I hated his face. I hated his head. I hated what came out of his mouth. I honestly hated that guy. And I'm not going to be a hypocrite and act like I didn't. His videos were pushed at me. And so would you say, oh, you have no compassion? And then you start to ask, you go, okay, what happens when you get overly compassionate toward a certain ideology that would invariably destroy you and was planning on destroying not only you as a human being, but obliterating the entire field of thought, perspicacious thought, of mind, of intelligence, of becoming more, of reaching beyond, right? So you have this turning point. Well, that was a downturn. That was a turning point, and that was a downturn. And the only other turning point that I've ever heard of is actually a place that pumps meds into those who can't afford higher tier insurance. Oftentimes they're homeless, schizophrenic, and they're made into the pariahs and the outliers. And that is the sacrifice machine. I saw Charlie Kirk as somebody who's promoting that, whose overall agenda that he couldn't even see himself. So you could go, oh, you got to forgive the guy for being short-sighted. And it's like, no, he knew it. He knew it. He knew that he was proselytizing and pushing. Well, you only need to think this far. If you go further, then you're evil, right? So I really didn't like him. And I never saw a debate where I thought he won. I thought what happened is, wow, this certainly is a weak argument, a weak character in front of him that's handing him this. I think that most of those people were actually plants. And I think they were plants in a way of vetting them to make sure they were too stupid to make Charlie Kirk look good. Every single shooter situation, they want you to think it's an isolated event. Which one have they admitted to being involved in? All the way to Trump's scratched ear syndrome. Right? Like there's a whole bunch of people who never bought that, never believed that bullshit. And someone died. Right? My first reaction, along with my son's, one of my sons was, my other son likes Charlie Kirk. And I don't put him down for it. Like I don't butt heads. The ability to have an individual thought process needs to be cherished, right? It needs to be cherished. Because otherwise we're stuck in this staunch subset that we're faced with today, right? And you could say, thank God more is going on than meets the eye. Right? But did you see the videos that I showed from Red Panda Koala? That Charlie Kirk filmed seeing UFOs last year in October when he was in mid-flight. And they just kept coming and going, right? And they looked like UAP, in other words, high technology that is kind of linked between, there's probably another force beyond the Space Force that ties the Space Force and the Air Force and even the Navy, because these things are going, like once you have a UAP that goes underwater, is it now under Navy, right? What if they're under, like that's my whole thing with what UAPs are being used for and what UFOs have been, is that it's for underwater travel. I think there's an underwater highway system. I think that there's an entire area that's blocked off that can't be seen with electromagnetic field, what have you, right? And that they use nuclear power. And I think that this subset of Masons at the tip of the iceberg, but as a representation, just like when they overthrew the offspring of the inner earth dwellers, which were the giants, right? That they have taken over and usurped power over the inner earth dwellers. The Hyperboreans, the Nords, I think they actually have used Black Project money to attack them. They're militaristically minded, and Trump may or may not know about it, but he represents a stifling of human development to keep us in stasis, right? So that there won't be any refraction or backlash. But they're not going to allow people like me to exist much longer. People who are higher level thinkers that push the bounds of thought beyond the merely acceptable. Because what you get into is this murky, mercurial moral practice that can't be vetted or trusted. It's like, well, if you can give yourself leave to think and do anything, that makes you dangerous because you're calling on the energy from terrible dark forces. And it's like, who's your God? It's like, you're the dark force, you know? So to be a person who mixes things up, like Jesus, right? I'm not saying I'm Jesus, but what I'm saying is, or that Jesus even existed, but what I am saying is, it becomes incendiary. You're here to bring fire, right? But it doesn't mean that that's what I exist for, is chaos and disorder. It's just only under the guise of the fact that true chaos and disorder has been in charge and taken command. And some would argue and say that it's always been that way. But these are factions, right? And at the end of the day, it's just money and power, right? That's all most people can see, is the money and power aspect of it. But yeah. How long do we have? Oh yeah, hour and 45. Yeah, we've had a nice walk so far.